Welcome to a new episode from English Plus Podcast. This is your host, Danny, and I'm so glad to be back in 2025 after this long break. I recharged my batteries and I got better after a small setback, and now I'm ready to start this year with a lot of content that I hope you love. Now, we will start with our magazine. We're going to talk about genome sequencing, reading the book of life. Imagine if you could hold a book that contains the entire story of your existence. Every chapter, every plot twist, every trait that makes you, well, you. What if I told you that we've already cracked the code to this book? Genome sequencing has made it possible to read the ultimate manuscript of life, the genetic blueprint that defines every living organism on Earth. But here's the kicker. What do we do with this knowledge? Can we rewrite parts of the book? Should we? And what if, in doing so, we accidentally mess up the plot? Stick around, my friends, because we're diving into the fascinating and sometimes controversial and incredibly cool world of genome sequencing. Alright, now let's take a moment to appreciate how mind-blowing it is that we can decode our DNA. DNA, the famous double helix, is like a 3 billion letter code that spells out everything about you. Genome sequencing is the technology that allows scientists to read this code. Think of it as the Google Translate for life's language. But here's where it gets interesting. Unlike Google Translate, this isn't just about understanding the words. It's about understanding their meaning. Now, before you start imagining your DNA as a literal book on a shelf, let's clarify something. Genome sequencing isn't some magic trick that instantly explains everything about you. It's more like being handed a library of really technical books and having to figure out what they all mean. For example, we can identify the genes that might make you more prone to diseases like cancer or diabetes. Sounds great, right? But knowing you're at risk doesn't always mean we can prevent it. That's like reading the weather forecast saying rain tomorrow and still getting caught without an umbrella because you forgot to check the time. But here's the ethical question. If we can read the code, should we edit it? Gene editing tools like CRISPR have already made this possible. But playing God comes with responsibilities. Imagine you could fix a gene to prevent a disease. That sounds noble. But what if people start editing genes to make their kids taller, smarter, or, dare I say it, better at karaoke? It's a slippery slope from curing diseases to designing humans. And there's the practicality of it all. Genome sequencing isn't exactly cheap. Although costs have dropped significantly over the years, it started as a $1 billion venture for one genome. Now it's under $1,000 for a person's entire genetic blueprint. That's like going from buying a Ferrari to grabbing a decent second-handed car. But even at that price, it's not accessible to everybody. Imagine the inequalities this could create. Some people having access to life-altering information, while others don't. And here's a fun real-life application. Genome sequencing isn't just for humans. We're using it to improve agriculture. Scientists are identifying genes in crops that make them more resistant to drought or pests. It's like giving plants their own superhero powers, except their capes are invisible. And during the COVID-19 pandemic, sequencing was used to track the virus's mutations, giving us a fighting chance to develop vaccines. But let's bring this back to you. How would you feel if someone offered to sequence your genome? Would you want to know everything about your genetic risks? Or would ignorance be bliss? It's like peeking at the ending of a novel before you've read the first chapter. For some, it's empowering. For others, it's terrifying. Now, what do you think, my friends? But don't go anywhere. We're going to talk about some vocabulary in context here. You don't want to miss that. Alright, so let's learn some vocabulary in context. Let's start with genome sequencing. It's the process of figuring out the exact order of the 3 billion letters in your DNA. Think of it as spell checking the ultimate essay. You can use this phrase in real life when talking about scientific breakthroughs like genome sequencing has revolutionized medicine. Then we have genetic blueprint. It's a fancy way of saying your DNA is like a set of architectural plans for your body. You might say our genetic blueprint determines traits like eye color and height. And how about CRISPR? It's a gene editing tool that's basically the DNA version of a word processor. It lets scientists cut and paste genes with precision. Now, you could say, for example, CRISPR could potentially cure genetic diseases, but it's not without controversy. Then there's playing God. This phrase means taking control over something that's naturally out of human hands, often with ethical implications. Now, imagine saying, for example, some people think gene editing is like playing God. And we can't skip slippery slope. This refers to an action that seems harmless at first, but could lead to serious consequences. For example, we say allowing designer babies could be a slippery slope. And well, there's genetic predisposition, and this is another good one. It means you're more likely to develop a certain condition based on your genes. For example, she has a genetic predisposition to diabetes. And what about superhero powers? Now, while this is a bit playful, it works well to describe enhancements like those given to crops. For example, genome sequencing can give plants superhero powers against pests. And let's talk about inequalities. Well, this word refers to unfair differences between people. You might use it like this. You might say genome sequencing could create inequalities in healthcare access. And don't forget mutations. These are the changes in the DNA sequence that can be harmful, beneficial, or neutral. For example, we can say scientists track the virus's mutations to develop better vaccines. And finally, we have ignorance is bliss. Well, this phrase suggests that sometimes not knowing something is better. When it comes to genetic risks, some people believe ignorance is bliss. Now let's reflect on these words. What's one way we could use genetic blueprint in a conversation about your family's traits? Or how would you explain slippery slope to someone skeptical about gene editing? And before I leave you, I've got a couple of questions for you to discuss as well. As usual, I say that if you want to really master a topic, master the English and the knowledge, take it to the next level, you should use the things you learn. Use the words, use the knowledge, talk about it. That will make your English perfect and you will take knowledge to the next level. That's exactly what we're trying to do here in English Plus Podcast. So let's start with the first question. If you could sequence your genome, would you want to know everything about your genetic risks? Why or why not? And do you think gene editing should be used to enhance traits like intelligence or athletic ability? Or should it be limited to curing diseases? And finally, how do you feel about the idea of genome sequencing becoming widely accessible? Would it create more opportunities or more inequalities? Well, think about it, my friends. And as usual, you can share your answers with me in the comments. You can send me emails if you want, or you can talk about it with your friends and family. But as always, use the knowledge that you learn, because that's the only thing that's going to take your English and knowledge to the next level. And with that, we come to the end of this episode. Don't forget to come back for more, because we're going to have a lot of magazine episodes. It's not everything. We have a lot of other types of episodes. And of course, I will have to say that not all of them are available for free. Some of them are free, and other episodes are available only to subscribers on Apple Podcasts or Patreon. You can find the link in the description. If you really want to unlock access to all our back catalog and all our premium episodes, you can do that by becoming subscribers on Apple Podcasts or Patreon. And with that being said, thank you very much for being here. Remember, never stop learning with English Plus Podcast. I'll see you next time.